What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here, and in this video, I'm going to be ranking all the exotic missions in Destiny 2 in a tier list. Now, we've had quite a lot of exotic missions over the years. The Last Word had a special exotic mission, as did Thorn and Still Hunt. But these were more exotic quests with a special mission tied to them. They weren't quote-unquote replayable missions. For that reason, I will not be including them on this list. This list will be comprised of all the exotic missions that were introduced that we could select from the director and launch and play at will. To my surprise, that means we have a whopping 14 missions. I was actually shocked by this. So before we get into this video, this is the last video I still have to make before moving on from Destiny. Most videos I have scheduled were recorded and edited a while ago, but I am voice recording this the day after releasing my response to a creator named Bradley the Bradster, so this is really my one and only chance to address this whole drama. If you don't care about this, then skip to the timestamp in the video chapters. First, I didn't want to make a response video at all. His video released on February 19th and a friend sent me it. I watched it with my girlfriend, we laughed, and I was ready to move on. Then the same friend sent me a video by Mr. Gaming Counselor and I watched that, and he had made some good points. Again, I was still just going to leave it. I went back to my old city that weekend and met up with lots of friends, had an amazing time catching up with my old buddies from work and college. Then we were driving home on Sunday the 23rd, so like 4 days after Brad's video, and I was still thinking maybe I should respond and give the feedback to Bungie. That's really what the video was intended for. I don't like drama and I hate being caught up in it myself, much less internet drama where tens of thousands of people can weigh in. But he said he wanted to have a conversation and I guess the stars aligned. I have a video coming out Sunday basically just thanking Destiny, and that was going to be my final message. No negative feedback towards the game on my way out the door, just appreciation for the game that I loved. But anyways, that's not how things went down. To Brad, I have no ill will towards him whatsoever. In fact, I've come to respect him. He could have taken cheap shots at me in the comments, but he really didn't. And a lot of the comments on his video were kind of rude towards him, so I definitely feel bad. I hope he takes it as a learning opportunity in his content journey, and I'm sure he will, as will I. But yeah, props to him for leaving the video up. Also, I implied he may be a Bungie plant, which was poor on my part, and that is just not true. Thanks to the commenter for clearing that up. Seriously, I was out of line with that and it was a mistake. I can't take it back, I can only learn and grow and be better next time. He truly just likes the game a lot, like many of you. So that's definitely a mistake on my part. My bad. I liked a lot of the comments on my response video thanking me for the fun times and informative content over the years, and I truly appreciated reading them, so thank you. But any comments calling him names or saying he should shut up and know his place, I didn't like those. Everyone is entitled to an opinion, whether you have 10 hours in the game or 10,000. It doesn't matter. Everyone's perspective is unique and valid. But some do carry more weight than others, and that is a fact. Like, my opinion on a medical procedure means a lot less than a certified expert in that category. So I think where Brad went wrong was trying to discount my opinion as an expert on the game. That's all. He's entitled to say whatever he wants about the game, good or bad. I know I have been shitting on Bungie a lot lately, but the game does have a lot of good qualities too, otherwise we wouldn't be playing it. And I think it's very important for new players like him and Mr. Rafflewaffles to share their insights as a newer player on what they like and what they dislike. If we want the game to survive and thrive, these players are needed. They are absolutely vital. To the people in the comments saying they like both me and Brad, I love that. Cut through the drama, listen to both sides, make your conclusions, and move on. You don't have to be one team or another. Extremes in this us against them mentality is eroding society as a whole these days, and I truly hate it. It is not me against him or us against them. We all love and care for Destiny, and we go about it in the different ways we make our content. But Destiny is what we bond over. So to the people who say you blocked him and unsubbed, give him another chance. He acknowledged he said some things he may not have really meant, and I empathize with that. I say things in my videos that I regret too, even when they are scripted. When you are live, it's easy to want to hype up your chat and sensationalize things. I get that. So what he said in the video and what he actually meant may be two different things. If his content is not for you, then that's fine, but don't write the dude off because of one bad take. We all mess up and people deserve second chances. And by all accounts, I hear his content is fun, lighthearted, and positive, and again, we need more of that. Ironic for me to say given how I've been lately, but I'm on my way out the door and just saying things that need to be said before I leave. And Brad, if you hear this, there's truly no hard feelings on my end. Thanks for starting a conversation. I hope we both learn from this and go on to be better creators as a result. I truly have no beef with you. You seem like a chill dude, and I wish you nothing but the best. So, Now that that's out of the way, let's hop right into the list. We'll be going in chronological order, meaning we'll be starting with my personal favorite of all the exotic missions, the Whisper. This came to us in our first year of Destiny 2, way back in the summer of 2018. A player by the name of Blurry Ferret found a secret on IO and made a Reddit post asking the community about what they had found. They were unsure if it meant anything. Turns out they had stumbled into one of the most legendary pieces of content in Destiny history. Players then started flocking to IO to run a public event to trigger this secret mission, and if they beat it in the allotted 20 minutes, they would be rewarded with the strongest weapon in the game at the time, the Whisper of the Worm. I remember this moment so distinctly, even still. I was working night shifts all summer in a shutdown at the plant I used to work at. I was watching Destiny content creators post about the missions and showing the pathing of the jumping puzzle. I couldn't wait to get home and try it myself. I stayed up till like noon after a night shift just running with LFGs trying to get the Whisper. This was a time when Destiny 2 was coming off of Curse of Osiris, a true low point in the franchise, and Warmind had recently released, which was quite a good expansion and is what made me fall in love with Destiny. And this mission in particular is what hooked me. The secret way you activated it, the brooding, creepy atmosphere of the mission, the incredible scale of the environment, and the immense length of the jumping puzzle. It was all so damn cool, and the combat was very difficult. This was a totally different era of the game, where you had to earn your loot, it wasn't given out. I ran the mission 4 times before beating it on my Sunbreaker Titan. It was a double primary weapon system back then. You really had to be on point with your combat, and this mission demanded skill. You had to be quick and efficient in the jumping puzzle, and you had to slay out in a timely fashion to beat the bosses in time. It was so well done, and the reward was well worth the effort. Not only was Whisper of the Worm the top of the meta, but it was also a loving homage to a Destiny 1 classic in Black Spindle. So it also gets nostalgia points, and the design of the weapon is top notch as well. Everything about this mission is truly S tier. From it being a complete secret from the community, to having a desirable weapon and requiring skill to complete it, it all made it extremely rewarding when you finally overcame the obstacles. It was one of my favorite memories in the history of the franchise, and for that, it's an obvious S tier placement. Everything that an exotic mission should be, and a loving throwback to a bygone era of Destiny that so much of the community wishes it could relive. And not only was the mission amazing, but it also had many secrets for the community to discover and had you shooting oracles to earn the coolest ship in the game in the 1,000 Wings. A ship I have never taken off my Titan since I earned it. It's my favorite in all of Destiny. So how do you follow up the greatest exotic mission in the history of the franchise? Well, you run it back with an equally amazing mission in 0 Hour. Now, I fully admit, the reason I love Whisper so much is because it came out when I was just falling in love with Destiny, and it was the moment that got me fully hooked into the Destiny universe. That mission made me want to strive to be better at the game, and that is what kicked off my love for the franchise, and then Forsaken came out and knocked everyone's socks off with all the innovation and additions to the game. So a lot of my love for Whisper is thanks to nostalgia. By Season of the Drifter, I was fully invested in Destiny 2, and in May of that season, we got our next taste of an exotic mission in 0 Hour, and the reward was another Destiny 1 fan favorite in Outbreak Perfected, formerly known as Outbreak Prime. The Whisper mission had great atmosphere and scale, but it was pretty one-dimensional. You had a long jumping puzzle, and then a bunch of ad killing, and then a boss fight. With 0 Hour, you had combat early on, and then a long jumping puzzle, and then the Robo Vacuum Maze with Trevor, and then you finally drop down into a room for the boss fight. Whisper was tough to navigate at first, but 0 Hour was even trickier to figure out where to go, and it had 2 variants of the mission with different paths. This was some really cool innovation. It also had different burns at the time, or surges as we call them now, and these all had different paths for making your way across the checkerboard floor. These innovations were really cool and appreciated. As mentioned, the Whisper mission had some secrets, but 0 Hour cranked up the secrets even more. Just comparing the mission structure between the two, 0 Hour is probably a better mission overall. Those first few runs trying to figure out where the hell to go was so fun and exciting. And then racing against the clock to try and down the boss to earn the weapon. Again, it required mastery of the activity to overcome it. It is truly Destiny at its best. Funnily enough, the first video I ever made on this channel was a solo flawless commentary of me doing the mission on the heroic difficulty. I remember spending hours trying to beat it solo flawless, and it was so rewarding when I finally did it. Just like with Whisper, it inspired me to want to get better, to push myself to beat something so difficult by myself without dying. It was laying the seeds for my eventual channel theme where I mostly focus on solo endgame, so it holds a tremendous soft spot in my heart. 0 Hour is an absolute S-tier exotic mission. The computer console secret puzzles were super cool and confusing, so shout out to the geniuses at Raid Secrets who figure that stuff out. y'all are the goats. So Bungie came out hot with 2 S-tier exotic missions, and I'm sad to say that it was all downhill from here. Not that the future missions were bad, not at all, but just that, to me, nothing can really live up to those first 2 missions for a variety of reasons that I will get to. So just one short season later, in Season of Opulence, we got another exotic mission called The Other Side. This was the mission to earn another D1 classic in Bad Juju. This was a taken mission on the Leviathan that you launched from the Tribute Hall. It didn't have near the scale as the first 2. There was not really any jumping puzzle component, it was basically all combat. It was a pretty quick mission, and to be honest, nothing really stood out about it. In my mind, I have such vivid memories of Whisper and 0 Hour, but for this one, if it wasn't for YouTube videos, I wouldn't remember hardly anything about it other than the very end fighting the Taken on the stairs. It also wasn't overly difficult compared to Whisper and 0 Hour. But it was a stepping stone for me to get more into soloing all the content that Destiny had to offer. But overall, honestly, a pretty lame exotic mission. C tier for me. Up next, another exotic mission, another Destiny 1 reprised weapon, this time in the beloved hand cannon Hawkmoon. This was an exotic mission on the EDZ, and again we were fighting Taken. This one had combat and jumping puzzles sprinkled throughout. It also had secrets where you had to find feathers throughout the mission, and it had a rotating burn with the mission changing up in small ways depending on the burn, and for each burn variant you had a different boss. I soloed this one on only one of the variants, the solar one to be exact. It was pretty challenging for me at the time and felt like a big accomplishment. Also, match game was a thing back then, and this really made you have to think about your loadout, so that added to the difficulty for sure, especially solo. Shout out to Warmind Cells for helping me get the job done. But once again, nothing about this mission really stands out to me. It was a pretty run-of-the-mill exotic mission. It didn't really have any crazy secrets, but it did have a pretty challenging jumping puzzle on the way to the boss. But yeah, just mostly average in all aspects. I will give it a solid B tier. A fun enough mission with decent challenge in terms of both combat and the jumping puzzles. The next one was a return to form of sorts for Bungie as they released Presage just 1 season after the Hawkmoon mission. And this brought with it a totally new exotic weapon, not a rehashed one from D1. It gave us Deadman's Tail, a truly unique scout rifle that used to be a monster in PvP. It was also pretty damn good in PvE with anti-barrier scout rifle at the time. This was a Scorn-themed exotic mission, and the atmosphere of it is incredible. It takes place on the Glycon and has something to do with the Drifter ship. I don't know, I barely pay attention to story and lore, but let me tell you, the aesthetic of this place is cool as hell. I love the dialogue from the old pirate dude, the combat is very intense, it is quite challenging, and there is combat sprinkled throughout the whole mission. Rather than having long jumping puzzle sections like Whisper and 0 Hour were known for, this one is filled more with secret switches and pathing to figure out. It made the first run through super fun. It also had 2 different tiers of difficulty, and the harder version had a time limit, something that made 0 Hour and Whisper so iconic. Having a timer raised the stakes for those missions. It forced you to become proficient at the activity, and I think it's a wonderful addition to any exotic mission. It gives you a sense of urgency and rewards you for mastery, so it was nice to have this back. You had to learn where all the switches were and how to do everything if you were going to beat it. This mission was originally 25 minutes long, but when it was brought back into the game in 2023, it had a 30-minute timer. That, along with power creep, definitely made it easier to solo later on. But either way, I just like the missions with timers because it makes it more meaningful when you conquer the mission. But yeah, this is an extremely cool mission. The boss fight is a lot of fun and he hits like a truck. So this mission is kind of tough to rank. I do think it deserves S tier, but with a caveat. I don't think it is quite as good as Whisper or 0 Hour, as I truly believe those may be the best pieces of content we have ever gotten in Destiny 2. But it is still an incredibly fun mission to run even today, and it doesn't deserve a lower ranking just because it is being compared against 2 iconic missions. It is great in its own right. And as far as the new age exotic missions go, meaning exotic missions that came out after Destiny started the seasonal model, and not like what they had in Forsaken and Vanilla, this is about as good as it gets. Great environment, great combat, great pacing, just an all-around great mission, and one that I still enjoy replaying from time to time. It's a classic. So up next, we have an exotic mission that I don't personally like very much, and that is Vox Obscura. This is a Cabal themed mission that launched with Witch Queen, and it gives us the exotic Waveframe GL Dead Messenger, which is a super cool weapon. It sees us fighting through a war zone to take on a Scion boss. I don't know, I just hate when I have to drive a tank in this game, I guess. It's a unique and novel feature for sure, but just not really for me. So you have to take out the defense towers and then head inside and make your way to the Scion boss. The combat in this mission is actually pretty good, outside of the usual failings bonks that can end a solo flawless run in a hurry. I like that you have to be on point with your movement and enemy spawns in the boss room. If you are out of position when those turrets spawn, you're toast. So the combat is great, but nothing else is particularly memorable. No amazing jumping puzzles, no secrets to speak of. This is when we kind of move into the modern age of the exotic missions. They are now becoming more run-of-the-mill things rather than big events that define all that is great about the game. So Vox Obscura is a solid B tier. Fun combat, but not much else. After that, we have Operation Seraph Shield, a Fallen-themed mission. This is a return to form of sorts in that it has great scale and jumping puzzles. A lot of people like to bitch about reused assets in Destiny, but I have never cared. I care if something is fun. This has a lot of reused stuff from Deepstone Crypt, but for me, it is super well done. It incorporates the scanner, operator, and suppressor buffs, and this is something that is unique to this mission. Most exotic missions don't have much in the way of mechanics, but this one does, and I like it. It has huge scale, especially as you are outside doing the jumping puzzle. It's awesome. It doesn't have a ton of secrets, but that doesn't really matter. What is so cool about this mission is it is quite long, but it doesn't feel long. I always say it, pacing is so important in Destiny activities, and this one does it well. It mixes the puzzles and jumping sections and combat sections together very well. This one is a solid A tier for me. Oh, and it gave us Revision 0, which is one of the strongest and most unique weapons we've ever gotten in Destiny. It's so good. So yeah, this one definitely deserves a high ranking. It's a great mission. Next on the list is NODE.OVRD.AVALON, a Vex-themed exotic mission that gives us one of the most underrated weapons in Destiny, Vexcalibur. This is a monster of a glaive and a ton of fun to make builds around. The mission we get it from is pretty awesome too. I notoriously do not like most Vex-themed content. Vault of Glass is cool, but I don't care for Spire the Watcher, and Episode Echoes was an all-time stinker of a season. But dare I say, this may be the best Vex-themed activity we have in Destiny. The aesthetic is extremely cool, taking place inside the Vex network and has Asher Mir in it. Once again, the pacing is really well done. You have a few very intense combat sections mixed in with some jumping sections. And for me, I just like really good and challenging combat. There are lots of hidden collectibles to find to upgrade Vexcalibur week over week. Now, I'm not one for time gating, but I did not mind jumping in here each week to run this mission. Again, I found the pacing to be really good and the combat enjoyable, and for me, that is what I care about most in Destiny. This was a fun solo, and I will give it an A tier rating. I quite like this mission. One season later, in Season of the Deep, we got another exotic mission in Whetstone, which gave us the Stasis Scout Rifle Wicked Implement. This one is not quite like the others, as you can't technically launch it from the director. You have to do the seasonal activity deep dives, and partway through you would activate some statues to veer off the traditional path and enter this mission. For that reason alone, I didn't solo this mission because I did not like Season of the Deep at all, and I didn't want to jump through the hoops to do the mission. And then the mission itself was just kind of meh. The combat was quite difficult, the boss is a tormentor who is extremely tanky, but the mechanic to do damage was quite annoying as you had to run around a maze of sorts to kill enemies to get a buff to deal max damage to the boss. I didn't particularly care for the mechanic. The mission itself is mostly all combat and no real jumping puzzles. It did have a timer, which, like I said, I usually like, but even with that, it wasn't enough to move the needle for me. And the secrets in it are mostly just collectibles. It could just be because I really disliked Season of the Deep, so my bias is showing, but this one gets a C tier from me. I just didn't care for this exotic mission at all. 2 seasons later, in Season of the Wish, we would get our next exotic mission in Starcrossed, which gave us the exotic bow Wishkeeper. This was a Vex and Taken themed dungeon. The mechanic with the yin and the yang was pretty neat. The jumping portions weren't overly difficult, the combat encounters could certainly be challenging, but nothing really felt urgent. Like, you could take your time to get through the whole mission. The mechanic itself could wear off and you would have to grab the buff again. But with no mission timer, you could just play very safely if you just wanted to solo flawless it and didn't care about being quick. So that knocks it down a peg for me. It did have some secret chests and stuff, but nothing that was very memorable like Whisperer's 0 Hour. I will give this one a B tier, a decently fun combat experience and nothing else really. And of course you had to run it week over week to upgrade the craftable exotic, much like the last few to this point. But the subsequent runs didn't really have any changes. Just felt like doing a checklist more than anything, but it wasn't too long or difficult, so I didn't mind too much. So during Season of the Wish, we had an update called Into the Light, and in this update, they reprised the 0 Hour and Whisper missions. And I cannot tell you how happy I was that they came back. These missions are 2 iconic moments in the 10-year history of Destiny, and these missions deserve to be played by as many people as possible, and it is content that should be around until the game dies. The reprised versions aren't quite as good as the originals, but they're still excellent. Bungie did a wonderful job bringing them up to our current power levels and keeping the core of the mission intact. Just an outstanding job. So if the originals were both S+ tier, then these are S tier. Still a lot of fun and content that still holds up as some of the best in the franchise. So I did just kind of want to mention that they are back, slightly different, but still awesome. So shortly after Into the Light, we got the final shape, and with it came exotic class items. And to get these exotic class items, you had to run a mission called Dual Destiny. This was the first ever 2-player mission in Destiny. Like, you must run it with 2 people, you cannot beat it otherwise. Now look, I love playing Destiny solo as much as anyone, and many others do. But there were a ton of people complaining about this requiring 2 people. Look, I get it. Sometimes I just want to hop on and do my shit. But listen, we have to give props to Bungie for innovating here. A big reason the game is in such a terrible spot right now is because they have become extremely stagnant. Every other season or so we get an exotic mission and we have to run that mission at least 4 times to get all the upgrades. And we get a seasonal activity that is just the same old, same old. Dual Destiny broke the mold, and is one of the few times we have seen innovation in Destiny in recent memory. This mission is also cool as hell. Actually unlocking the mission was a bit of a chore if I recall, but it could also have been because I was so busy trying to do everything that the final shape had to offer while also making content steadily. It was just an extremely busy time. But once you had it unlocked and could just launch it, oh man, this mission slapped. I don't think it had much for secrets, and if it did, I didn't really do it. This was just about the gameplay experience more than anything. It has good pacing, good jumping puzzles, and great combat. It also has some pretty in-depth mechanics thanks to being a 2-player co-op mission. You have to work together. So to the people that whine about it not being soloable, do yourself a favor, get an LFG and find someone to do it. Believe me, it isn't that hard. The D2 LFG on Discord exists and I never have trouble finding someone for any activity on there. I get it is annoying having to be on comm sometimes, but the person on the other end is a lot like you, just trying to get some good loot from the game. This is one of the best activities Destiny has ever made, and props to them for the innovation. It is something we need more of if we want Destiny to survive and thrive. Sadly, I think the reception from the solo player base will steer Bungie away from trying stuff like this again, and it's a shame. Like I said, Bungie really needs to innovate and the game is starting to get stale, but this was a breath of fresh air. I'm gonna give it an S tier. It's a truly great mission. And from an awesome and innovative mission, we regress to probably the worst exotic mission Bungie has ever made, and that is Encore. Ironically, the reward is Choir of One, which is one of the best and strongest exotics that they've ever made, but the reward did not match the mission. The mission is a slog. Bungie heard us praise the scale of missions like Whisper, the long and complex jumping puzzles of 0 Hour. They heard that we like grand scale exotic missions, but sadly they misinterpreted the message. They thought that bigger and longer meant better, and that is not the case. Right, ladies? I remember before this mission launched, the Bungie devs hyping this mission up, saying it is the longest exotic mission they've ever done. But that is not what makes exotic missions great. You need memorable moments and set pieces, but above all, you need good pacing. I love the Hive. I love the faction, the aesthetic, the lore, everything. But I do not like Ghosts of the Deep because it has terrible pacing. Warlord's Ruin, on the other hand, has wonderful pacing. It's a tough balance to get right, but when it is right, you know it, you feel it. And when it isn't, you also really know it. And this mission just had brutal pacing. It's just a boring slog. Long traversals just for the sake of being long, just like descending in Ghosts of the Deep. Combat that isn't particularly difficult, there's no sense of urgency outside of when you have to run from the red death wall. The mechanics are kind of cool with having to activate the walls and stuff, and the mission did have a lot of secrets in it, but to me they all felt boring. They also had a secret version of the mission where you had a timer to add a sense of urgency. On paper, this mission should have been great. They checked all the boxes, but maybe that's the problem. It's like they had a focus group or a checklist of things they were trying to capture, and in doing that, they didn't give it any soul. They were too focused on checking the boxes and not focused enough on giving the players a cool experience. In art, you can tell the people who are making something that they enjoy and the people who are just making stuff to satisfy metrics. Whisper had ambiance, 0 Hour had that it factor, Presage had real art and theming. This mission lacks all of those things, at least in my opinion. It could be hampered by the fact that the Vex are boring as shit, so it's hard to do anything cool around them. But like I said, I really liked NODE.OVRD.AVALON because it was in the Vex network. It had that Vex je ne sais quoi. It was crafted in a way that had passion poured into it, and I think that is the key word. This mission just lacked passion. Like I said, it feels soulless. The exotic weapon is top tier, but that's about it. The final boss is boring and forgettable. The combat weak and boring. I'm placing this one low in the D tier. For me, this mission just did nothing for me. It felt uninspired and boring. And I want to add in something else. I talked about Bungie losing innovation. Well, by now we had also seen the cookie cutter formula of run this exotic mission each week for one more weapon perk. See you again next week. Bungie loves their time gates and forcing people to play content, and it really stuck out with this mission because episode echoes sucked and so did this mission. You can get away with repeatable chores week over week if the content is decent, but when it is horrible like this mission, it makes that predatory structure that Bungie loves feel absolutely awful. Here's some advice, Bungie. Make fun and enjoyable content and people will want to play it. You won't have to force them. Up next, Kell's Fall. This is a Scorn-themed mission and rewards us with the Void Shotgun Slayer's Fang. The reception to this one when it came out was icy to say the least. People really didn't like it. I do see some of the arguments. The first playthrough was a little too easy. 0 Hour took multiple tries to find the right way to go, where this one was pretty straightforward for the most part. And then the boss fights were pretty easy, especially in a fire team. But I talked about passion and aesthetic, about wanting to make something cool, and for me at least, this one hits the mark. The Scorn organ is a super cool touch. The mirror mechanic is also pretty cool, even if it's kind of basic, and the mirror realm has really good art style, something that I very much appreciate. I also really like the reef theming at the start, as it harkens back to the Forsaken Glory days, which were some of my favorite time in Destiny. I absolutely loved the Tangled Shore, and I still miss it to this day. What I would give to give all our sunset locations back. But back to the mission, the boss fights are a nice challenge on Expert, at least solo. One thing I do have to knock it for though is the boss immunities. But this is a Scorn issue more than a mission issue. But unless you are using Anarchy, then these bosses are a pain in the fucking ass to fight and it's really frustrating. It pigeonholes your builds if you want to be optimal and I don't like that. But like I said, that really isn't the mission's fault. Bungie just has to tweak Scorn AI. I had some runs where an enemy was immune for 30 seconds, just running under the floor with no way for me to deal damage to it. That shit is unacceptable. I'm not a fan. But yeah, I liked how the mission had secret hallways behind rocks, had secret melodies, including one that unlocks a secret boss fight. I didn't mind that it's on the quicker side. I like quick missions as long as they are fun. On Expert, the combat is actually quite challenging, even with our increasingly power-crept sandbox. So I'm going to be a contrarian here and give Kell's Fall an A tier. I really liked running this exotic mission. I think it was a lot of fun, and it was so much better than Encore. I hope Bungie continues to make exotic missions that have an art style and certain theme to them. That is when they are at their best. And finally, we have Derealize, the exotic mission to unlock the truly unique SMG Barrow Dyad. Now, I have to admit, I may rate this one lower just because mentally I am very down on Destiny at this point. So this just feels like just another exotic mission. Nothing stands out to me as unique, nothing is inspiring me to want to run it solo. It transfers you between dimensions, similar to the mechanics in the Oryx boss fight of the King's Fall raid. I love King's Fall and the Taken King and Dreadnought in general. But like I said, for this mission, nothing really stands out to me. It isn't good, it isn't bad, it's just more Destiny. The same old tired formula played out for the 14th time. Brings nothing new to the table, and for that reason, I will rank it in B tier. I just think it's middle of the road. Not egregiously bad and boring like Encore, but nothing really close to something like Presage. So now, let's recap. The only D tier mission in my opinion is the Encore mission. It awarded us Choir of One, a great exotic, but that is about the only good thing that came from this mission. It just felt boring and uninspired. In C tier, we have the Bad Juju mission, The Other Side. Again, to me, it was just a very unmemorable experience. And then the Wicked Implement mission, Whetstone. Not a terrible mission, but I don't like the way you had to start the mission, and the mission design just wasn't my cup of tea. In B tier, we had Harbinger, the Hawkmoon mission. This had 3 variants, but they were all fairly samey, and nothing stood out as amazing in these missions. Then we had Vox Obscura rewarding us with Dead Messenger, a war battlefield type mission with fun combat, but not much else. Starcrossed, which gave us Wishkeeper, a Vex and Taken mission that had some decent combat but no real sense of urgency or wonder. And then Derealize, the mission for the exotic SMG Barrow Dyad. Just another run-of-the-mill exotic mission in my eyes. Not great, not terrible. In A tier, we have Operation Seraph Shield giving us Revision 0, one of the best exotics in Destiny. This had immense scale and many fun combat encounters. It was quite long, but it didn't feel long, and that is crucial. NODE.OVRD.AVALON rewarding Vexcalibur is next, a mission with a strong art design and some fun combat and a decent amount of secrets. And finally, Kell's Fall, which rewarded Slayer's Fang, a short but fun experience with great art design. And that brings us to the cream of the crop, the S tier missions. The Whisper, which rewarded Whisper the Worm, a pioneer for Destiny 2, the first exotic mission which set the standard for all others. It had great theming, challenging combat, huge scale, secrets, a tough jumping section, and it rewarded you with one of the best weapons in the history of the franchise. 0 Hour, the mission that had to live up to the high bar set by Whisper and somehow managed to exceed it in some ways. It had 2 variants of the jumping puzzle and again was filled with challenging combat. It also had secrets and a great weapon to boot. Next we have Presage, great aesthetic, fun and challenging combat, a timer for urgency and to promote mastery, and a great weapon in Deadman's Tale. And finally, Dual Destiny, an innovative mission at a time when Destiny sorely needed it. Honestly, Bungie knocked it out of the park with this mission, and Final Shape in general. It was part of the total Final Shape package that was S tier in its own right, and helped provide a send-off that many long-term players deserved. So before I wrap it up, I do want to discuss the state of exotic missions in 2025. They are all generally pretty good, but as this video showed, we have seen this formula over a dozen times now. I honestly feel that if Whisper or 0 Hour came out today, they would not be received as well as when they were released. This isn't a knock on the quality of the missions, it more speaks to the fact that after this long in the game, we need new and innovative ideas. Even the best of the same old content won't cut it anymore. And the other thing is, with Whisper and 0 Hour, those were bespoke, one-off missions. For the past few years, they have tied the missions into the seasonal story structure, and they have had to make them less challenging so that the broader player base can complete these missions. This isn't a bad thing. However, it means we probably won't ever get the time-limited, difficult combat missions like Whisper or 0 Hour again. So if you feel like these exotic missions just don't hit like they used to, I think that is the reason why. Anyways, that's it for the list. Let me know what you think of my rankings down below, or share your rankings if you like. Obviously, I have certain biases for certain things, but I think overall the list is a pretty good indicator of community sentiment on some of these missions as well. Outside of maybe Kell's Fall. I just enjoyed that mission and I stand by my reasoning. Anyways, if you're still here, you're a real one. Thanks so much for watching to the end. I put a ton of time and effort into it, so leaving a like would be greatly appreciated. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Hey, if you're still here, then thanks so much for watching to the end. If you like what I do and you want to support me further, then consider becoming a channel member. You'll get your name featured on the end screen, custom badges, and other cool rewards. You can also join my community Discord if that interests you, and if you want to see me stream, be sure to follow me on Twitch at itstizzle7 where I stream semi-regularly. Those are linked in the description. Anyways, that's enough self-promotion. Thanks for watching. Take care.